Hello and welcome to another Dungeons & Dragons session dramatization set in the world of Alter Aeon. Our protagonists are Kara the War Mage, Morden the Hexblade, Tess the Sorceress, and Sened the Favored Soul. I am Shadowfax, the Dungeon Master. From this session on, the part of Fernando will be played by the Druckling. Also at the end of this session, Morden will be receiving a familiar of sorts. He, instead of getting the traditional spellcaster's familiar, like Fernando, he instead chose the alternative option, presented in the Player's Handbook 2, for a Dark Companion. Dark Companion acts as sort of a floating hex that can move around the battlefield and impose penalties on opponents. Morden took the opportunity to procure some rare reagents that he needed in order to complete a ritual, which he performed in private. After our heroes had finished shopping, Sened showed the others around the city of Barquisimeto. He had been there several times before. They tasted maltas at Sened's favorite bodega, and had an authentic Zulian dinner of butter-stuffed flatcakes and chicken empanadas at one of the local restaurants. The groups stayed the night at the inn and had a good night's sleep, and in the morning enjoyed a breakfast of cornmeal pancakes with hand cheese. Our heroes decided to talk to the locals to find out more about what had happened in Pelham. The city was divided into several walled wards at varying elevations, and they had spent all of their time at the lowest ward where the main gate in and out of the town was. A constable directed them to the chieftain's hut at the highest ward. The group had an audience with the leader of Barquisimeto, Chieftain Fortello. He informed our heroes that refugees from Pelham had already arrived and were camped out around the main gate. The chieftain seemed disinterested in the plight of Pelham until Tess made him realize that whatever had destroyed Pelham would probably come after his city next. This did perplex him, and he agreed to pay them to scout out Pelham and discover what had happened to the village. In the meantime, he would muster an army to repel any invaders. Our heroes visited the refugees camped out near the gate, which included Pelham's wise woman. A dozen Turbana Eye-Wings had visited Pelham about a week ago, and they had been quite pleasant and playful with the residents. However, a few days later, they all disappeared, and soon thereafter they returned 100-fold in number and began attacking the village. She informed our heroes that only she and the handful of people with her were the only survivors that she was aware of. The status of Lord Pelham or any of his family was currently unknown. She drew a map of the village for them and wished our heroes good luck. Neither she nor any of the villagers with her were capable of combat, but she did give the group a couple of cure disease scrolls. After that, the party headed out to Campo Verde. The land thereabouts was mostly flat, grassy fields in the western portion near Barquisimeto, and became more rugged in the east near the Pelham Cemetery. It was a bright and sunny day, and the group could see in all directions for miles. They traveled the whole day, and noticed that some imps were watching them the entire time, flying parallel to our heroes and keeping their distance about a half-mile north of them. Sometimes there were just one or two, but at other times there appeared to be a half-dozen of them. They were various colors, and ranging from dark red to a pale orange to a rusty brown, but all of them were about 2.5 feet tall with bat-like wings, a tiny pair of horns, and barbed tails. Just before nightfall, the imps all appeared to vanish at once. Our heroes made camp on the eastern edge of Campo Verde, just outside the fenced-in portion of the Pelham Cemetery. They started a fire and made camp. Kara took the first watch. About a half hour after the others had gone to sleep, a blood-red imp suddenly appeared in front of Kara. She made ready to cast a spell, but the imp assured her that he just wanted to talk. He told her that he couldn't help but notice that she and her fellows had been traveling all day and were probably very tired. He then told her that he and his associates would be more than happy to keep watch over her and her friends all night so that they could sleep, for the low bargain price of 400 gold pieces. Kara replied that she wasn't interested and began waking the others, despite the protest of the imp that it wasn't necessary to wake anyone else up. The imp continued to try and negotiate, but soon the entire party was up and ready to fight. After a firm, final answer of no to the imp's offer, he wished them pleasant dreams and disappeared. A little less easy now, Kara resumed keeping watch, and the others went back to sleep. For the next couple of hours, Kara would occasionally hear rustling in the grass or what sounded like whispering. Each time she would wake the others, and they would look around and find nothing, and then go back to sleep. By the time it was Morden's turn to keep watch, the imp's strategy was becoming apparent. They were staying invisible, and were trying to keep the group from sleeping. Unfortunately, they couldn't think of any countermeasures besides yelling at them, so Morden ordered the others to go to sleep and said he would wait for their next move. About 20 minutes later, Morden heard what he thought sounded like flapping wings, but there was nothing to see. He moved toward where the sound had been, and then felt an awful feeling in his chest, like an unseen hand was clasped around his heart and squeezing it. He breathed slowly and calmly, and the sensation soon faded. Morden returned to the fire and waited. The heart-crushing sensation returned a few minutes later, and again Morden resisted it. After resisting it a third time, the imps lost patience and attacked. 4 imps immediately appeared, each of them scratching and biting at one of our heroes. Almost in unison, they retreated and went invisible once again before our heroes could properly counterattack. The group remained awake and alert, but time passed and nothing happened. Just as they were considering leaving, the imps reappeared and attacked again, and then retreated and vanished. Their hit-and-run tactics grew more aggressive, with less time between each wave of attacking imps, and they were wearing our heroes down. Finally, in a stroke of luck, Tess managed to catch one of their foes with a high-powered magic missile spell, and blasted the little bugger to fleshy bits. By this time, Sined was running low on healing spells. He, Kara, and Tess then all felt the same heart-squeezing feeling as Morden had. Kara and Sined shook it off, but Tess succumbed to the new supernatural curse and felt her skin crawl as it took effect. An orange imp dive-bombed Tess and knocked Fernando off of her shoulder, impaling the ferret with its needle-like tail. The familiar was injected with a poison that rendered him drooling and helpless. Kara annihilated the imp with an acid orb for its trouble. A blood-red imp then tried to poison Morden, but he skewered it with his silver dart. Another pair of imps harassed Kara, striking and going invisible. Tess used glitter dust and covered them, and Kara, with a fine layer of gold powder, negating their invisibility spells. While so exposed, our heroes made quick work of the dusted imps, and no more presented themselves thereafter. Our heroes decided to break camp and head south for a couple of hours before going back to sleep. While traveling, the group shared some more about their background with one another. Tess told the story about how she became an orphan and lost all of her immediate family. Ever since she was small, Tess had always wanted to be an entertainer like her father, but her mother insisted that she be trained to be a diplomat like her. Tess would secretly practice performing, and later she would sneak out into the night to do performances on the streets of Ralnoth, albeit far away from where her family lived. Several years ago, in order to improve the clan's social standing, it was arranged that Tess's oldest brother be wed to a Rubicon noblewoman. While staying at the Rubicon's castle, Tess's mother overheard Tess talking with some of her cousins about her nocturnal antics. They had a huge fight, which ended up with Tess running out of the castle into the nearby forest. She stayed out there for a few hours before returning to find the castle in flames. As far as she knew, there were no survivors. Her mother, father, all of her siblings, and much of her extended family, not to mention her future in-laws, perished in the disaster. Tess went back to live in Ralnoth alone. Although her parents were well off, Tess discovered that her family was far more in debt than she had been aware of. and quickly realized that she lacked the funds to continue the lavish lifestyle that she was accustomed to. She supported herself through street performing and doing odd jobs around town. When she mentioned how she met Fernando, hiding in a pile of straw during a thunderstorm, Morden said that was quite remarkable. He had always thought that magic familiars were typically called, not discovered, as he had been present when Blaze had called her familiar. Tess tried to explain, but found it difficult to express exactly what happened, only to say that she immediately felt a deep connection with the ferret, even before seeing him. In a fashion, she felt drawn to him, which is how she was able to find him hidden in the straw to begin with. Her magic power began to blossom from that point forward, and through trial and error she discovered how to cast spells. Morden opened up and talked a bit about his background. He explained that he too was an orphan and had lost all of his family in a disaster nearly a decade ago. He was from Dunhurst and was there when the city was destroyed. The others gasped in dismay. Although the details were sketchy, news of the destruction of Dunhurst had traveled far and wide. Even Sened had heard about it while on Slowey. Morden said that he was in the nearby forest hunting when the whole city just lifted into the sky, as if it had been gripped by a gigantic invisible hand and torn from the ground. He didn't want to talk about it further, but he did say that he had been around the Dunher and had lived in Jocairn for a while, which is where he had met Blaze. Sened then shared his life story, starting with how he killed a man when he was 8 years old. His name was Sened Orito Montoya Santa Maria. His mother had died a few months prior from a plague. Morden asked Sened if he knew his father, but Sened said that his mother had told him that he did not have a father. Anyway, Sened had been living on the streets of Bandera Azul when a man arrived in town preaching about Denton. Back then, the High Pantheon was still a new concept among the natives of Slowey, who did not have any organized religion of their own. Sened found the man's sermon intriguing, but his proselyting was not well received by the gathered crowd, and they soon turned violent. The mob seized hold of the preacher, and someone seared his eyes out with a hot iron. Infuriated by what he had witnessed, Sened's latent powers were awakened, and he began to glow with a bright light. Shouting at the man who had put out the preacher's eyes, Sened angrily stabbed a finger toward him, and a beam of silvery white light shot out, blasting a hole clean through his chest. Pandemonium erupted, and the preacher was able to escape during the chaos. Sened also managed to escape, running into the Blue Marshes, where he lived for months by himself, using his newfound powers to defend himself from the wild beast that dwelt in the marsh. Sened prayed every day to know how he should carry on, when finally he received a vision of Denton, who told him to seek out the reliquary near Pelham. Sened first went to Vemarken, where he met the preacher whose life he had saved, Valerio José Rogelio de la Vega, the same Valerio who would later become High Priest of the Vemarken Shrine. Sened studied religion under Valerio for a short while, before really realizing that the dogma of the Order of the One Way didn't agree with him, so he headed west to Pelham, where he met Pilchem Highgander, the personal cleric of Lord Antioch Pelham. After studying under Pilchem, Sened joined his order, the Order of the Eternals, but still had trouble learning to cast spells like a cleric. Pilchem took Sened to the secret reliquary and introduced him to the Keeper, and the demon recognized Sened for what he was. The Keeper told Sened that it was no wonder that he couldn't learn to be a cleric. He was actually a favored soul. Under the demon's tutelage, Sened learned to control his powers. The Keeper then tasked Sened with retrieving the Sunlight Staff, and Sened had spent the past 2 years searching for it before their adventure in Venetia. Kara said that she was sorry, and that she didn't have a tragic backstory to share like everyone else. Her parents and siblings were all alive and well, and living a pleasant life in Ralmouth. She did express surprise that she had never seen one of Tessa's street performances, but Ralmouth was a big town, and they were from different parts of it. And that is where our session ended. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel to continue following the story of our heroes. Transcripts of our Dungeons & Dragons sessions are available at www.lawful-evil.org/DND. If you enjoyed this and don't already play the game this is based on, you can explore the world of Alter Aeon for yourself by visiting www.alteraeon.com. Remember, the family that plays together stays together. Thanks for listening, and happy mudding, everybody.
Alteraeon.com. That's ALTERAEON.com.